This is how I use Cursor to code my startup. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my system for using Cursor to code everything. So you'll learn the best practices that I've picked up after talking to a bunch of the lead devs at Cursor on Twitter, and also just spending countless hours building and using this tool since it came out over a year ago. So by the end of the video, you'll be able to streamline your workflow, and it'll save you a bunch of time and effort. And so I'm Parker X. I'm from mapthemap.com. I actually used Cursor to build this landing page in about a day. I've also used this same tool to build pretty much everything. I made a little stats website that pulls in live obesity data and GDP data, and it's live to the date. And I'm also building more complex stuff, which is actually the application itself, which is a combination of Google Calendar plus all of your health data, plus a bunch of vendor indexing and LLMs that are working together to make a model of your peak self. And so it can kind of go to the moon. But in my last video, I actually spent some time making a video on how to make an Apple Notes clone, and I got a lot of comments that were saying, hey man, like you sped this up, too much zoom going on with the mouse, calm it down. So I'm gonna make it a little bit better this time. So let's jump right into Cursor on the settings that I'm using to make the most out of this tool. So the first one is actually around using Homebrew to update it. So they ship a lot of updates and they're really helpful, but sometimes the changelog just doesn't reflect that. So if you went to the Cursor changelog and Cursor changelog, stick with me if this is important. But a lot of the stuff that they put on here, it would say like the last update, looks like it came out 2 days ago, but sometimes there's another update that comes out and you don't get it. So I would recommend using Homebrew, and the way that you do that, if you're a developer, I'm hoping you are because you're watching this video, but you just put that installer in there. If you don't have Homebrew, you can use warp the terminal and use Command I to say, hey, install Homebrew. So that's the first one. The second one is actually around the Cursor rules. And so rules for Cursor are really important because it's like a pre-prompt to whatever you're going to ever be doing in Cursor. And so a lot of people know about this rules for AI thing. So in order to get to the Cursor settings, you just hit the settings cog. Everything AI is up on the top right. But this is super limiting because you can't have version control. And version control matters, and you can't have a bunch of different ones. So you could put literally .cursor rules in here and then edit it as you see fit. And then you can have different versions of this. So in the .ai folder, you could have rules as a directory. So based on the work that you're doing, you can have different prompts in there. And it's really important to have all the time. A good resource for getting a boilerplate for this is actually Cursor directory. So cursor.directory. And you go in there and you grab one. So for me, I use this one, the TypeScript one, and then I just edit it as I see fit. The next most important one for my workflow for using Cursor is actually under the Features tab, the indexing. So code-based indexing, obvious. You should automatically do this where it knows everything about your code base. When you're doing a lot of changes, like let's say you added 50 files, deleted a bunch of files, changed a bunch of logic, you're going to want to go in here, delete the index, and resync it. Do that periodically. Try to do it every couple of days. And then docs. Docs is very important. So you're most likely working with a lot of APIs. I know in my case, I'm working with Garmin, I'm working with Whoop, I'm working with Google Calendar, and all these different things, Supabase. So whether it's an external API or it's a framework or it's a BAS like Supabase, you're going to want to have that in your custom docs so you can reference it. And the killer here is you need to, one, use Kebab Case because it's going to make it a lot easier when you're actually referencing this stuff. Because if there's spaces, it doesn't pick that up and it actually breaks the ability to add something or tag it. So use Kebab Case, and then when you're breaking it out, do it specific to the API and specific to the docs. So in the case of Google Calendar, if I went to the Google Calendar API, see I spent a lot of time here, what I would do is, in this case, I can do a resource summary or whatever the top thing is, then I'd paste that in and it would run through. And I want to actually make sure that it did that. So I can click on a little book and I can see it indexed 337 pages. Because in the case of Google Calendar, you have different resources which represent all the capabilities of the API. So you have access control list with all these methods. You have calendar list with all the methods. You have calendars with all the methods. Kind of confusing. You have channels, colors, events, free, busy. So you want to have that as Google Calendar-API. That one's pretty obvious, but then you would just check it. If the docs are updated, now Google Calendar doesn't really release a lot of updates, but you just hit reindex and you can do it that way. And then for others where you have both documentation and docs, so like an API reference in docs, you would actually want to do them separately. So in the case of Whoop, I would type in Whoop API docs. I would go to the site. I would take a quick scan to see like what's actually in here. Then I'd grab that route and I'd add it. So I'd hit, add new doc. I'd paste that in. I'd double check the prefix. And then I'd hit submit. It would add that in. It would turn yellow till it's done. Once it's green, it's done. And then I'd have a separate one for the docs. So I'd go back and I'd hit docs. And then I'd grab the introduction and it would scan through all that. And then I would check and see, like, did it actually do it? Okay, cool. It indexed 13 pages. This looks like there's about 13 pages. Great. So that's really important. Now, one on Supabase specifically, or anyone that has a lot of different products that you're integrating with, I just learned this one, and it's actually a best practice from the team at Supabase. But they add specific ones for the JS SDK, for instance. So he has a doc, and instead of just having like one called Supabase, he's going to go in, he's going to grab the JavaScript one, he's going to grab the URL for that, and then paste it in, and he's going to name it Supabase-JS. So the same thing would be said for in the case like I have webhook support with Google Calendar and a bunch of different things. So that means that I have to have Supabase real-time docs. Under the hood that uses Elixir, it's dope. But I would grab that, and then I put that in there, and I do Supabase-real-time. So that's a really important one. Make sure you're having all those indexed properly. Then there's other settings that I think are really important. Is like I make the always search the web off by default because I want to be explicit. So if I'm doing a prompt and I'm going to use something that's recent, I am doing a sync with Google Calendar that pulls in not only the events, but all the settings. So like, do you use hotkeys? What days does your week start on? Is it Sunday or is it Monday? Is your custom calendar 4 days or 6 days? How do you set these things up? When are the notifications? What are the reminder settings, the resource? Like there's a zillion things. And I don't want it to just go and like search the web and like hope that it finds it. I want to be like, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Here's the expected outcome or the user journey for the user with a numbered list. So super specific. And then here's the docs, : space, paste the docs. So in that case, you'd either do the URL if you didn't already index it. I recommend indexing them first, or you can just have it be a web URL. I turn off the fade chat stream. It's annoying. Narrow scroll bar, auto scroll chat. Turn that off because you actually have to read the code that it generates. I feel like a lot of people, and this was me like a year ago when I first started using this, was I just expect that it's going to work, and it's just so like, it's God mode. But you still need to know the content, or you still need to know the content of what it's giving you back. And you also need to be competent. So you still need to know the concepts, and you need to know what it's generating. So read through all the stuff that it gives you before you just blindly hit accept. Last thing, make sure these are on. Make sure you're using Sonnet for, if you're using TypeScript, it's just Elite and React. Use Claude 3 Sonnet, turn all the others off, and then O1 Mini, O1 Preview. I haven't had much luck with, but I still keep them on in hopes that it gets better. Last thing on the performance is delete your chats. Delete your chats, delete your composers when you get done with a feature. So in my case, I finished up the full calendar sync where you touched a bajillion different files, and I had a lot of threads because I was trying to figure out like, how does this work? How should I do this? What's the best pattern? Yada, yada, yada. After I got done with that, I would go in and I'm just going to click on this little back thing and I'm just going to delete all of them. So I do that and I do that in the composer as well. And then if it's still slow, you can go and delete the cache. So you could do rmrf on the application support cache or .cache in your index. So if this is helpful, make sure you like the video. That's how you pay me. And you also get your free good deed. Karma's a cool thing. Like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. If you have any questions specific to how to use other tools in Cursor, I'm happy to do that. I just have not seen a video that's specific to the settings. I see a bunch of marketers that are like showing you how to make apps and all that stuff, which there's nothing wrong with it. And I'll see you in the next one.